today my topic of discussion is the Battle of Monmouth and Molly Pitcher. I will cover some of the key points and the significance of this engagement to provide an overview, and then discuss some of the folklore that surrounds Molly Pitcher. To orient you on the Battle of Monmouth, you can see on the map that it's centrally located between Philadelphia and New York. The terrain is comprised of rolling farmland separated by dense woodlands and springs. For this battlefield, some of the primary terrain is Combs Hills on the southern flank and Perrine Hill to the north. The British movement is from southeast to northwest, which allows Washington to have terrain advantage. Now, British Commander Howe wanted to move his entire army back to New York, which left them vulnerable with a march column that stretched 12 miles. Fresh out of the hardships and difficulty of Valley Forge, the Continental Army needed a victory, and Washington was determined it to be in New Jersey. The initial plan was for Lee to attack the rear guard with harassing fire as Washington would maneuver to the flank. Up to this point, Washington would employ a hit-and-run tactic that would fool the British into thinking he had a larger force. Cornwallis, however, was beginning to see this, and when Lee made his first feel of the rear guard, the British was prepared to maneuver the force. Almost immediately, British Commander Clinton wheeled his rear guard toward Lee and provided overwhelming resistance. Lee hesitated and allowed the British to move a division back to support the rear echelon, giving them the advantage. Now, Washington would observe this and ride forward, taking over command of the advanced force and establish a front line to hold off the British until the main body was set to attack. At times, he would end up placing himself between the front lines of both, inspiring his men to fight. Washington's main force was located on Perrine's Hill with support by fire comprised of cannons on Combs Hill, which was perfectly placed to the fire into the flanks of the British front line. Multiple attempts to break through the Continental lines were made, but the training they had received from von Steuben, perfectly placed cannons, and strategic use of the terrain, they were unable to do this. While there was not a winner declared, and both sides had almost identical casualties, to Washington and the Continental Army, it was a victory. The drills and hardship from the winter had made them into a professional army that could contend against the British. Now, this is the battle where Molly Pitcher was born. Folklore tells the story that she was providing water from the stream for her husband's cannon crew when her husband became a casualty. She quickly rose to the occasion and stepped in, manning the cannon for the remainder of the battle. Apparently, from his position, Washington observed this woman's heroic actions and awarded her a promotion to sergeant, and the legend of Molly Pitcher was born. There's been a significant amount of controversy in this story, and specifically, who was Molly Pitcher really? Two main contenders that it could be was Mary Ludwig Hayes and Mary Corbin. Both followed their husband from battle to battle. Both their husbands was in the 4th Artillery Battalion. Both received battlefield promotions, and both were recognized by the state to receive a pension for their action during the war. Interesting enough, in the 18th century, Molly was a commonly used nickname for people named Mary, and of course they both carried a pitcher in their duty supporting the gun crews. On the Battle of Monmouth, there is no less than 3 markers that state this is the location of Molly Pitcher's heroic stand. The first is located directly in the middle of the British lines. The second, logically placed based on the location of the gun, and the third near the train tracks that divide the battlefield. Analyzing the graphics of the battle plan, Molly would have been on the north end where the battery was in place near the spring and overlook. The other fact that is known as Mary Hayes is that her husband was a gun crew leader and in fact didn't become a casualty. It is considered more realistic that she augmented wounded members of her husband's gun crew and likely assumed less of a leadership role during the battle. Considering a gun crew in 1778 consisted of 16 men, all of which had jobs and was very technical and regimented, it is more likely this was the role she filled. The legacy both women left, however, was very significant, and at the time provided inspiration to a growing nation and a demonstration of heroics still recognized today by the U.S. Army Artillery Organization, where they recognize the brightest soldiers with the Order of Molly Pitcher Award. Despite the folklore that surrounds it, this was a great example of how everyone contributed to the success of the Continental Army, and both women should be celebrated.